When most people picture a European castle, there's this immediate, almost instinctual romanticization that happens. We imagine like sweeping tapestries, grand banquets, chivalrous knights.
Right, yeah, like royalty holding court.
Exactly. We treat them like fairy tale sets, like something straight out of a theme park. But welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, Gary, and sitting down with me is our resident history expert, Emily. And today we are completely peeling back that romanticized veil, because the truth is, those fairy tale sets are a complete fabrication.
Oh, absolutely. It's a deeply sanitized version of history. I mean, we completely strip away the grit, the cold, the disease, and honestly, the sheer brutality of what those structures actually were. They weren't, luxury estates.
No, not at all.
They were highly efficient, just blood-soaked war machines.
Blood-soaked war machines. That is the perfect way to put it. They were built for survival, for absolute dominance, and really for inflicting maximum violence upon anyone who tried to take them. And today on Haunted Podcast, we're diving into one of the most famous tourist attractions in all of Europe.
Yeah, it's a place that draws millions of people. Mm-hmm. People who willingly engage in this bizarre ritual.
Right, completely unaware of the blood, the witchcraft, and this relentless curse embedded in the very foundation of the stone they are touching.
And few places hide their dark history better, honestly. I mean, we're looking at a location where the manicured gardens and smiling tour guides just completely mask what is essentially a geographic battery of paranormal energy and, prehistoric death.
Yeah, prehistoric death. We are going to get into that, and it is wild. But before we unlock these heavy iron gates, I want to speak directly to you, the listener. If you want to support Haunted Podcast and help us uncover more of these historical nightmares, we need you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell.
It really helps us out.
It does. In fact, you might want to just leave this deep dive playing in the background right now. Just let the eerie vibes soak into your room. It helps the YouTube algorithm immensely, and it sets the perfect, unsettling atmosphere for what we're about to discuss. Just be careful what kind of energy you're inviting in.
Yeah, okay.
Also, drop a comment down below. Have you ever brought an object home from a trip that just felt, fundamentally wrong? We really want to read your stories.
That atmosphere is crucial for today, really. Because our mission is to explore the Blarney Stone in Ireland.
Right.
But we aren't looking at it as some quirky piece of limestone that you kiss for good luck. We're examining it as an ancient artifact, one that is steeped in a terrifying and very documented wrath.
So let's set the scene. To understand the corruption of the stone, you really have to understand the fortress that holds it, right? Blarney Castle. It sits just about 5 miles northwest of Cork City, but those towering, imposing stone ruins you see today, that's just the latest iteration of a site that has seen, over a millennium of continuous conflict.
Yeah, over 1,000 years. Yeah. That's the baseline we have to establish here. The grounds themselves hold this heavy residual energy because this specific plot of land has been fought over and bled upon since, the 10th century.
Wow.
Back then, it was merely a wooden hunting lodge. It was a place for the local chieftains to gather, hunt, assert their dominance, but wooden structures burn.
Right, they rot.
Exactly. They fall easily to a prolonged siege. So in the year 1210, the first stone castle was erected.
And even that wasn't enough to withstand the violence of the era, was it?
No, not even close.
The true transformation, the fortification that gave us this terrifying behemoth we recognize today, that happened in 1446. This was orchestrated by a man named Cormac, later MacCarthy. He was the king of Munster. And when you look at the architectural specifications of what MacCarthy built, you realize instantly that this was a man who went to sleep every single night expecting a slaughter.
Oh, entirely. He was building an impenetrable, deeply paranoid monolith. The walls of this keep are 15 feet thick.
15 feet?
Just visualize that. 15 feet of solid, dense stone separating the inhabitants from the outside world. And the towers rise 120 feet above the surrounding plains.
Which is massive for that time period.
Unprecedented in the area.
Yeah.
From that vantage point, the guards had absolute visual command of the region. They could see an approaching enemy army from miles away.
Yeah.
It basically became the strongest, most feared fortress in all of Munster.
But, it's the kind of place that almost invites a siege, like a challenge. And one of the most fascinating historical events here was the siege of 1646. This was during the 11 Years' War. Parliamentarian forces completely surrounded the castle. They bombarded those massive walls with artillery, just trying to starve out the inhabitants.
This brutal tactic.
For weeks, the air would have been just thick with the smell of sulfur, rotting bodies, starvation, desperation. Eventually, the outer defenses broke, and the parliamentarian forces stormed the keep.
But when they finally breached those heavy wooden doors, expecting brutal hand-to-hand combat in the great halls, they found absolute silence. The entire garrison had completely vanished.
It reads like a ghost story, just written right into the military archives. An entire garrison of armed soldiers just gone, poof, into thin air.
Well, they hadn't vanished into thin air, but rather into the earth.
Right.
The defenders utilized this sprawling, just labyrinthine network of natural caves and hand-carved tunnels. They sneaked deep beneath the castle foundation. This subterranean network allowed them to slip away completely undetected, literally right beneath the boots of the conquering army.
Which is brilliant.
It is. And what makes this escape even more legendary is the payload they supposedly took with them.
Oh, right. The golden plate. But here's where I have to push back a little on the logistics of this lore, because the garrison was allegedly guarding a massive plate of solid gold, right? And they supposedly hauled this heavy, priceless artifact down into the darkness of the tunnels, eventually throwing it into the depths of a nearby lake to hide it.
That's a legend, yeah.
Oh, but wait a minute. If it's solid gold and it's that massive, how did starving, exhausted soldiers drag it through a cramped, pitch-black cave system while actively fleeing for their lives? I mean, that sounds like local myth-making just to drum up treasure hunters,
It's a highly valid skeptical point. I mean, hauling hundreds of pounds of solid gold through a claustrophobic, unlit cave system during an active military breach, it completely defies logistical sense.
Right.
However, whether the plate was truly solid gold or, perhaps a highly significant religious relic that the folklore just exaggerated over time.
Like a game of telephone over centuries.
Exactly. The core truth remains that they took something of immense value into the dark. And to this day, despite modern sonar and all these diving expeditions in the nearby murky waters, whatever they hid has never been found.
That alone gives the grounds this incredible aura of mystery. But this brings us to the most, I think, unsettling contrast of the entire estate. Millions of tourists line up to kiss the Blarney Stone. They view it as this incredibly romantic, charming Irish tradition,
Yeah, bucket list item.
Right. But I want to paint a vivid picture for you, the listener, of exactly where this famous stone is located. It isn't sitting on a pedestal in a pristine garden. It's positioned at the very bottom of something called a metropolitan.
Which just completely shatters the romantic illusion. A metropolitan is a prominent, strictly functional feature of medieval military architecture. It's an opening, essentially a heavy grate or a gap set right into the floor of the overhanging battlements of a castle tower.
And these weren't for, dropping flowers on returning hero.
No, not at all. They were designed for maximum agonizing lethality. When an enemy force would try to scale the walls or break down the heavy doors at the base of the tower, the defenders would stand safely above these machicolations.
Up top.
Right up top. And they would pour boiling oil, scalding water, rendering animal fat, or just drop massive crushing rocks directly onto the attackers below.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was a mechanism for raining fiery, just agonizing death upon anyone caught in that spatial void.
So let's really think about what that means from a sensory perspective. When a tourist leans back to kiss the Blarney Stone today, they are literally putting their head into the exact spatial void where hundreds of men were agonizingly boiled alive.
It's grim.
It's incredibly grim. For centuries, that specific patch of porous limestone was soaked in rendering fat, blood, and the visceral terror of dying soldiers.
The contrast is totally jarring. You have a spot designed purely for terror and agony, basically slaughterhouse floor suspended 100 feet in the air, and it's now celebrated as a place of luck and charm.
It's wild.
And if we consider the stone tape theory, the idea that minerals like limestone and quartz can act as a recording medium for extreme emotional and psychic energy.
Right, like a geological tape recorder.
Exactly. It raises a serious question about what kind of dark, corrupted energy tourists are actually tapping into when they press their lips to that stone.
Which naturally leads us to the most baffling question in all of this. Where did the specific rock actually come from? Because if you look at the folklore, the origin of the Blarney Stone is one of the most hotly debated, wildly mythological topics in all of history.
Oh, the legends surrounding the stone are as grand as they are contradictory. they're often trying to attach immense divine or royal significance to it.
Right.
Like some of the oldest folklore claims that the stone is biblical in origin. One prominent theory is that it's Jacob's pillow.
Jacob's pillow?
Yeah, the exact stone that the biblical patriarch Jacob rested his head upon in Bethel when he had his vision of angels ascending and descending a ladder to heaven.
Wow, okay.
After that dream, he supposedly consecrated the stone as a sacred object, a literal bridge between the human and the divine.
And the biblical claims don't even stop there. Another legend says it was the very rock that Moses struck with his staff to bring forth water for the Israelites in the desert. Now, how a rock supposedly got from the sands of the Middle East to a medieval Irish battlement is a whole other web of myths.
Yeah, the logistics of that are tricky.
It usually involves, like, the Knights Templar smuggling it back as a spoil of war after the Crusades.
Right. There's also a strong Irish religious myth claiming it was the deathbed pillow of St. Columba. But perhaps the most pervasive historical myth, the one that was actually taught as fact for a very long time, is the Scottish connection.
The Stone of Scone?
Yes. Yeah. It was widely believed that the Blarney Stone was originally a chunk of the legendary Stone of Scone,
which is the sacred magical rock upon which all Scottish kings were crowned.
Correct. So the story goes that in the year 1314, during the Battle of Bannockburn, the Irish sent 4,000 men from Munster to help the Scottish king, Robert the Bruce, defeat the English.
Okay.
And out of profound gratitude for this military support, Robert the Bruce allegedly split the magical stone of Scone in half and gifted one piece to Cormac McCarthy. McCarthy then installed it into his impenetrable battlements.
I mean, it's a brilliant story of political alliance and magical artifacts. It ties Irish and Scottish history together in a neat little bow, but it completely ignores the older, much darker pagan folklore of the area. Have you heard the legend of Cleona?
The fairy queen, yes. This is where the lore sheds its Christian and political overtones and takes a deeply supernatural, ancient turn.
So Cleona was a powerful side, right? A fairy queen in Irish mythology. And according to the old tales, she was known for draining the life essence from young men she fancied. She was a predator.
Very dangerous.
Very. But eventually she fell deeply in love with a mortal man, a warrior who completely spurned her affections. He actually refused her.
Which is incredibly dangerous in Celtic lore. You do not reject the fair folk. They operate on a completely different moral axis than humans.
Exactly. But before she could enact any petty revenge, this warrior was killed in a brutal battle with a rival clan. Cleona found his body on the battlefield. He had bled out onto a large stone. And the legend says she was so overcome with this volatile mixture of grief, obsession, and the sting of unrequited love that she wept inconsolably over his body.
Wow.
Her tears mixed with his spilled blood on the porous stone, and that intense, raw, psychic emotion imbued the rock with her fairy magic, specifically the magic of beguilement and charming speech.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition, really. I mean, on one hand, you have tales of holy men, prophets, and kings. On the other, you have a predatory fairy queen weeping blood and tears to create an object of supernatural persuasion.
Right.
And for centuries, these clashing stories were all we had. The stone was a geological mystery. Until the year 2014, when the hard sciences finally stepped into the ring to settle the debate.
And this is where the story gets so incredibly interesting for me, because you would naturally assume that modern science would just debunk the magic, identify the rock, and make the whole thing terribly boring, right?
Yeah, that's usually how it goes.
But the scientific truth is somehow just as eerie as the legends themselves.
It truly is. To understand this breakthrough, we actually have to trace our steps back to the 19th century, to a pioneer of geology and chemistry named Professor Matthew Forster Heddle.
Okay.
During the mid to late 1800s, Blarney Castle was essentially an uninhabited, overgrown semi-ruin. It wasn't the polished, highly regulated tourist trap it is today. Professor Heddle, or, perhaps one of his daring associates, managed to do something seemingly impossible. They obtained a physical sample of the Blarney Stone.
Which is wild to even think about, considering the stone is hanging upside down out of a 100-foot drop. Someone had to literally hang by their ankles in the wind, holding a heavy iron hammer and chisel just to chip off a piece of this thing.
Yeah, it was an incredible, highly dangerous acrobatic feat, just for the sake of geological curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
But Heddle took this hard-won sample and created a microscopic slide. He grounds a slice of the stone down so incredibly thin that it became transparent to light. And then, the slide was lost to history.
Just vanished.
Yeah. It sat forgotten. in a massive collection of over 40,000 geological slides at the Hunterian Museum at the University of Glasgow.
For over a century, just sitting in a dusty drawer until 2014. That is crazy.
Right. During a massive digitization project, a researcher named Becky Smith found this unlabeled, obscure slide hidden in the handwritten ledgers. They handed it over to Dr. John Faithfull, the curator, who finally put it under modern microscopic analysis.
And what did Dr. Faithfull find? He shattered the Scottish myth entirely, didn't he?
Completely. The analysis proved definitively that the Blarney Stone is not a piece of sandstone from the Stone of Scone. It isn't a blue stone from Stonehenge. Yeah. And it certainly isn't from the Middle East. It is a 330-million-year-old piece of local Carboniferous limestone. It is entirely natively Irish.
But wait, the chemical makeup, what is that limestone actually made of?
That is the detail that sends a chill down the spine when you think about the paranormal implications we were just discussing. The microscopic slide revealed that the stone is packed with the recrystallized and deformed fragments of fossilized brachipod shells and bryozoans.
Meaning it is made almost entirely of ancient, dead, organic life.
Millions upon millions of prehistoric sea creatures. Organisms that lived, died, and were compressed under unfathomable geological pressure over the course of 330 million years.
Let's synthesize this for a second. Every single person kissing the stone is pressing their face against a compressed microscopic graveyard.
Yeah.
It's a literal block of concentrated prehistoric death. Earlier, we talked about the stone tape theory and the energy of the machicolations. If you believe that objects can act as batteries for spiritual or paranormal power, what kind of massive energetic charge is being held in a porous rock made entirely of millions of dead organisms soaked in the blood and rendering fat of medieval warfare?
It completely reframes the concept of the stone. It isn't just a quirky rock. It's a reliquary of ancient death. It's a sponge for trauma. And when you look at how the stone supposedly behaves, how it bestows this famous gift of gab, you have to seriously wonder if that concentrated, corrupted energy is interacting directly with the human mind.
So let's unpack that gift of gab, because the word Blarney itself has a very specific historical origin. It doesn't just mean being chatty or outgoing. It has a much darker, much more manipulative connotation.
The term actually enters the English lexicon thanks to Queen Elizabeth I. During her reign, she was systematically trying to force Irish landowners to surrender their ancestral lands.
Right, and then occupy them under a new title from her.
Exactly, essentially demanding they pay heavy taxes and swear loyalty to the English crown. She desperately wanted control of Blarney Castle.
Naturally, as we established, it was the strongest, most impenetrable fortress in the region.
Right. So the Queen sends the Earl of Leicester to negotiate the formal surrender of the castle with its owner, Cormac McCarthy, the Lord of Blarney. But McCarthy was an absolute master of psychological warfare. Every single time the Earl attempted to finalize the surrender, Lord Blarney would throw a massive, extravagant banquet.
Just stalling.
He would send these incredibly long, flowery, deeply eloquent progress reports to the Queen, filled with lavish compliments, legal loopholes, and brilliant excuses, but absolutely zero physical concessions. He managed to delay the seizure of his property indefinitely without ever actually saying the word no.
And Queen Elizabeth eventually saw right through the manipulation. She grew so frustrated with these endless beautiful letters that resulted in zero tactical progress, she reportedly threw one of his letters to the floor and shouted, "This is all Blarney. What he says, he does not mean."
From that moment on, Blarney became synonymous with eloquence used for a highly specific purpose. The ability to influence, flatter, coax, and, most importantly, to deceive without offending.
To deceive without offending. That is such a chillingly specific gift. It's the magic of a sociopath, honestly. You're charming someone so thoroughly, weaving such a pleasant web around them, that they don't even realize they're being manipulated until it's too late.
It's insidious.
And people are so desperate for this manipulative power that they will undergo a genuinely terrifying physical ritual to get it.
Oh, the physical mechanics of kissing the stone cannot be overstated. Even today, with modern safety measures like iron grates and staff members holding you, it is an incredibly visceral, unnatural experience.
Yeah.
To kiss the stone, you have to lie flat on your back on the cold, damp stone floor of the battlements. You must reach backward above your head to grip 2 iron bars. Then you have to slowly inch your torso backward, lowering your upper body and your head out over a literal 100-foot drop into the open void.
And before modern iron safety grates were installed, people used to just hold onto the ankles of their friends.
I know, it's insane.
You would literally dangle a friend by their boots over a 10-story drop so they could press their lips to a rock. If their grip slipped, or if your boot slid on the damp stone, you plummeted to a very messy, irreversible death.
And despite the sheer mortal danger, world leaders and cultural icons have risked their lives for this alleged power. Winston Churchill visited and kissed the stone in 1912.
Really?
Yeah, and many historians and folklorists attribute his incredible rhetorical skills in Parliament, the very speeches that rallied a nation during World War II, to that specific moment on the battlements. Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones has kissed it. Former U.S. President Ronald Reagan kissed it. The allure of this sociopathic charm is intoxicating across all walks of life.
But I want to throw a psychological theory at you, something grounded in hard biology. When you're hanging upside down over a 100-foot drop, your body doesn't know it's a tourist attraction. Your survival instincts are screaming. Your amygdala is firing on all cylinders. Your bloodstream is suddenly flooded with cortisol and massive amounts of adrenaline. When you finally pull yourself back up onto solid ground and your brain realizes you aren't going to die, you experience a massive, overwhelming rush of dopamine and euphoria.
The profound biological relief of survival.
Exactly. So, is it possible that the gift of gab is nothing supernatural at all? What if it's simply the euphoric, hyperverbal state that comes from a massive adrenaline dump? You survive a brush with death, your brain is buzzing with neurochemicals, and suddenly you feel confident, untouchable, and incredibly talkative. It's a biological high, not a fairy's blessing.
It's a highly plausible, scientifically sound physiological explanation. I mean, the sheer euphoria of cheating death could absolutely translate into a temporary state of immense charismatic confidence.
However,
Yes. That purely psychological explanation falls completely flat when you examine the other side of the stone's magic. Because while kissing the stone might just be an adrenaline rush, stealing a piece of the stone triggers a chain of events that physiology and neurochemistry simply cannot explain.
the curse.
The terrifying, deeply documented, and highly active wrath of the pilfered stone.
According to the lore, when Cormac McCarthy built this impenetrable fortress, he didn't just rely on 15-foot walls and boiling oil to protect his wealth. He supposedly wove a dark, binding curse into the very grounds of his estate to protect his home from thieves, looters, and conquerors.
The spiritual defense system.
Exactly. The rule is absolute, and it brooks no exceptions. Anyone who removes a stone, even a tiny, seemingly insignificant pebble from the castle walls or the surrounding grounds, will suffer relentless, agonizing misfortune until the item is returned to the earth it came from.
And we aren't talking about some spooky campfire tale told to keep kids from picking up rocks. It's an administrative nightmare for the current owners of the estate.
Wait, really?
Yes. Sir Charles Colthurst, whose family owns and maintains the castle today, has publicly confirmed that they receive heavy packages in the mail every single year, postmarked from all corners of the globe.
That is wild.
These packages contain rocks, stones, and pebbles, and they are always accompanied by desperate, pleading, sometimes terrified letters of apology.
Let's look at some of the documented case studies because the consistency of the symptoms is staggering. Take the case of Liam Sermon, a Canadian tourist who visited the castle in 2009. He knew about the curse, but like so many modern skeptics, he thought it was just tourist nonsense designed to sell keychains. To prove a point, he purposefully tore a small piece of loose stone from the castle walls, pocketed it, and took it all the way back to Canada.
And the retribution he faced was immediate and severe. According to his own documented letters to the estate, Sermon experienced months of back-to-back catastrophic misfortune.
Just nonstop.
We aren't talking about stubbing his toe or getting a flat tire. It was a cascading collapse of his personal, financial, and professional life. The bad luck was so oppressive, so unnatural in its frequency and severity, that he finally swallowed his pride, packaged the stone up, and mailed it back across the Atlantic, begging the estate to return it to the ground so the curse would be lifted.
But the curse doesn't just target the person who committed the theft. It seems to attach to the physical stone itself, acting like a spiritual contagion that infects whoever holds it. Just look at the case of Linda Kelly in 2010.
Right.
She lived in South Carolina. She had never even been to Blarney Castle. She had no idea the curse even existed.
She bought a small piece of the stone for exactly $1 at a local estate sale.
Yeah.
The estate belonged to a retired priest who had recently passed away. And it was noted by those who knew him that this priest had lived a profoundly sad, tragic life, marred by constant, inexplicable misfortune. He was a man surrounded by a dark cloud.
So Linda buys this rock, thinking it's just a neat paperweight. And almost immediately, her own life begins to violently unravel. Her highly successful real estate business suddenly dries up completely. Deals fall through for no reason. She spirals into a deep clinical depression.
It's terrifying.
She describes feeling this oppressive, heavy darkness that she just couldn't shake, like a physical weight on her chest. It wasn't until she researched the markings on the rock, discovered its origins, and learned of the McCarthy curse that she decided to mail it back to Ireland.
And this is where the psychological argument you brought up earlier faces its biggest, most insurmountable hurdle. If Linda's bad luck was just a self-fulfilling prophecy caused by a pessimistic outlook, sort of reverse placebo effect, it would take significant time for her to psychologically recover and rebuild her life.
Right. Depression doesn't just vanish.
But she reported that the very moment the rock was out of her possession, the moment she handed the package to the postal worker, the oppressive atmosphere vanished entirely. Her life, her business, and her mental health restored themselves almost instantly.
How do you explain that with biology? I mean, if a curse is just guilt making you see the glass as half empty, you don't instantly cure your clinical depression by dropping a cardboard box at the post office.
It heavily suggests that the object itself is radiating an active, tethered paranormal energy. The stone isn't just a placebo, it's a cursed battery. And as long as it is sitting in your environment, it is actively disrupting the probability fields and emotional frequencies around you. It bends reality to cause harm.
And if you need proof of just how violent, aggressive, and deeply lethal this tethered energy can be, we have to talk about the tragedy of Siobhan and Oren.
This is a highly specific, deeply terrifying account that surfaced on a paranormal storytelling channel. And while some might try to dismiss it as an urban legend, it treats the physical lore of the castle with a gravity and a geographical accuracy that is incredibly hard to ignore.
We're going to present this story as the terrifying reality it could very well be. Listeners, picture this. It's the first warm spring day after a long, brutal, freezing Irish winter, the kind of day where the air feels electric. Siobhan invites her friend Oren to visit Blarney Castle.
Right.
But Siobhan is not a typical tourist looking for a photo op. She's spent the entire winter doing obsessive deep dive research into the historical archives, the old maps, and the dark occult history of the estate.
Through her research, she's come to a very dangerous conclusion. She believes that the famous stone that millions of tourists kiss, the one with the iron guard rails, the safety mats, and the staff members taking photos, is a modern decoy.
A fake.
A fake put there to satisfy the masses, generate revenue, and keep the true, powerful artifact hidden safely away from the public.
So they arrive at the castle grounds. They cross this long, narrow, slightly terrifying wooden rope bridge that spans a deep ravine. But instead of following the brightly colored signs to the tourist trap, Siobhan ducks under a roped-off restricted area. She leads Oren up a crumbling spiral staircase into a completely deserted, structurally precarious section of the upper parapets. The wind is howling up here, and she stops in front of a boulder built into the wall that is noticeably different from the rest of the limestone.
It's darker. It seems to almost absorb the ambient light around it, rather than reflect it. And it is hanging over a terrifying, deadly drop into the rocky gorge, far higher and far more dangerous than the sanitized tourist area.
And Oren immediately feels it. He experiences the physical manifestation of raw paranormal energy. He describes the air around the stone feeling thick, heavy, like trying to breathe underwater.
That's classic paranormal saturation.
He feels a static charge vibrating in his teeth, tasting like copper and ozone. Siobhan tells him this is the real stone, the one blessed by the goddess Cleona's bloody tears. She lies down on the treacherous, unprotected edge, hangs her head over the dizzying abyss, and manages to brush the dark stone with her lips.
But Oren is paralyzed by the sheer height. He looks down at the jagged rocks hundreds of feet below, and he starts to succumb to extreme vertigo. His vision blacks out at the edges, his balance centers fail him, and he almost pitches forward into the void. Siobhan has to sharply command him to step back, to snap him out of his hypnotic trance. But the heavy, corrupted energy of the stone has already infected his reasoning. As they are turning to leave the parapet, Oren makes a fatal, impulsive decision. His logic is twisted by the static in the air. He thinks that if merely kissing the stone grants incredible power, physically taking a piece of it must be infinitely better.
Oh, no.
Yeah. When Siobhan turns her back to navigate the stairs, he reaches out, yanks a loose, jagged chunk of the dark rock from the boulder, shoves it deep into his coat pocket, and runs after her.
He breaks the cardinal rule of the McCarthy curse. He steals from the battery. And the environment's reaction isn't delayed like a string of bad luck. It is instantaneous, and it is violently hostile. As they are sprinting through the dim corridors of the castle to escape the restricted area, unseen forces begin physically attacking the space around them. The castle itself wakes up. A heavy medieval tapestry violently rips from the stone wall, kicking up centuries of dust. A massive suit of iron armor crashes to the flagstone floor right behind them, the metal echoing like a gunshot. And then Orin hears it.
It's a disembodied voice, but not a faint whisper in the wind. It's a thundering, oppressive, booming voice, echoing directly between his ears, vibrating in his skull, repeating a single terrifying phrase, "The stone, the stone!"
They burst out of the castle, gasping for air, and run toward the rope bridge. Orin is absolutely panicked, his heart hammering against his ribs, the voice pounding in his head. They step onto the swaying wooden bridge, high above a raging ravine of freezing water. And this is when the curse enacts its final, calculated judgment.
The bridge mysterious begins to unravel.
Exactly. Not break from their weight, but actively, malevolently twist and snap apart beneath their feet, as if invisible hands are pulling the ropes.
It's an orchestrated collapse designed to trap them. Siobhan falls to the splintering wood, but miraculously manages to grip a piece of the dangling rope netting hanging precariously over the rushing water below. Orin isn't so lucky. He is violently yanked upside down, his leg caught in a tangle of thick ropes dangling right above her, swinging like a pendulum.
And as he is hanging there upside down, the movement and gravity pull the stolen chunk of rock out of his coat pocket. It falls and strikes Siobhan right in the face. She sees the dark, jagged stone. She realizes in that split second exactly what he has done. She looks up at him, her eyes wide with absolute terror, and screams over the rushing water, "You unleashed the curse!"
And those are her final words.
Yeah.
The thick wooden slat she is holding violently snaps in half. But she doesn't just fall into the river. According to the account, as she hits the water, Siobhan is dragged deep underwater by an unseen, forceful entity. She doesn't bob to the surface. She is pulled straight down into the freezing depths, far beneath the surface, never to come back up.
Orin screams for her, thrashing against the ropes, but his mourning is cut brutally short. The thick rope holding his leg snaps with the sound of a gunshot, and he plummets headfirst into the shallow, rocky edge of the raging water. He is killed instantly on impact. Despite extensive searches, neither of their bodies is ever recovered. The river swallowed them whole.
But the most chilling detail of this entire account, the specific detail that confirms the presence of a tethered supernatural intelligence rather than just bad luck, is what happens next.
This part is so creepy.
As the water calms over their vanished bodies, the chipped piece of the dark stone magically breaches the surface. It floats up out of the rushing water, defying gravity, and travels all the way back up the ravine, back up to the castle wall, and seamlessly re-embeds itself into the fortress.
The local officials, of course, officially classified the event as an unfortunate accident due to poor bridge maintenance and structural rot. But the locals who know the lore, who understand the ancient, bloody geography of the curse, they know exactly what happened. The stone was stolen, and it demanded its blood price to return.
It's a harrowing account, and it perfectly illustrates a concept we need to explore deeply. The idea that the dark energy of Blarney is not just confined to a single piece of limestone. The entire estate, the very soil, the water, the air, it is all corrupted. It's a fully functioning, haunted ecosystem.
Yes. Let's talk about the grounds themselves, because if you manage to survive the castle without getting cursed, you still have to navigate the horticulture. And Blarney has a feature that is uniquely unsettling, something you don't find at typical tourist traps. The poison garden.
Usually, castle gardens are designed for aesthetic beauty or practical sustenance. You see sprawling rose bushes, medicinal herb gardens, or vegetable patches. But tucked away behind the imposing battlements of Blarney is a garden where normal life-sustaining plants simply refuse to grow. The earth here seems to reject anything wholesome. It only yields toxicity.
The groundskeepers actually cultivate a massive, carefully curated collection of the world's most deadly, psychoactive, and historically cursed plants. We're talking about fields of wolfsbane. In folklore, wolfsbane was used to detect or repel werewolves, but in reality, it contains a deadly neurotoxin that can cause asphyxiation just from touching the sap.
Just from touching it.
Yeah. They grow mandrake, the infamous roots that resemble human beings, and supposedly scream when pulled from the earth, causing fatal madness to anyone who chews it.
They also grow ricinus, the castor bean plant, which produces ricin. That's one of the most lethal, naturally occurring poisons on the planet, where a dose the size of a grain of salt can kill a human.
Wow.
They have opium poppies, cannabis, and deadly nightshade. The plants are so inherently dangerous that they have to be grown in large, heavy, semicircular iron cages to prevent tourists from accidentally touching, inhaling, or ingesting them. It's as if the soil of the estate naturally harbors, nourishes, and amplifies toxic intentions.
And this sprawling, toxic landscape perfectly surrounds another terrifying landmark on the grounds, the Witch's Cave.
We mentioned earlier that Cormac McCarthy supposedly learned the secret of the stone from a witch he saved from drowning. But the local lore goes much, much deeper than a simple exchange of favors. That witch didn't just give him a secret and leave. Locals believe she became permanently bound to the estate.
And how? Like a prisoner?
Exactly like a prisoner.
Yeah.
The legend states that she is trapped, physically imprisoned within the grounds during the daylight hours. She is entirely unseen, essentially non-existent when the sun is up. But the moment night falls, the magical binding loosens just enough.
She gets out.
She is released. She escapes to a heavily wooded ancient area of the grounds known as the Rock Close, and she desperately seeks shelter in a specific, damp cavern known as the Witch's Kitchen.
And this isn't just an ancient, dusty myth that people forgot about in the history books. This is an active, modern haunting. Because locals and early morning groundskeepers swear that if you visit the cave at the very crack of dawn, in that liminal space before the sun has fully risen and forced her back into hiding, you can feel the physical heat and see the dying, smoking embers of the fire she built to stay warm through the freezing night.
It implies a continuous, cyclical haunting. A spirit trapped in a nocturnal, torturous loop of survival on the grounds of a cursed castle. And the haunting isn't just limited to human spirits either. The local ecosystem, the very wildlife, is deeply affected by this corruption.
You're talking about the River Martin. This river flows right beside the castle, the same river that swallowed Siopon in Oran, and as one of the most bizarre, visually striking paranormal phenomena I have ever heard of. It isn't haunted by the glowing ghosts of drowned soldiers or murdered maidens. It is haunted by spectral fish.
Specifically, ghostly salmon. Credible observers for generations have documented seeing the translucent glowing apparitions of salmon leaping out of the dark, freezing waters of the river.
That is wild.
And they aren't just jumping randomly. They're actively leaping to catch ethereal, ghostly insects hovering in the moonlight.
That is so incredibly unsettling. I mean, when an animal ghost is present, especially functioning in a complete spectral food chain, it suggests that the spiritual corruption of a location is so absolute, so thoroughly saturated into the environment, that it traps the souls of the flora and fauna as well. It's not just a haunted house, it's a haunted reality.
It leads us to a broader, absolutely vital realization. Blarney Castle is not an isolated anomaly. You cannot fully understand how a curse this powerful survives for centuries, how it maintains its lethal potency without zooming out and looking at the paranormal ley lines of the entire country. Ireland itself is a massive hotbed of spiritual unrest.
It really is. To understand the battery powering the Blarney Stone, we have to do a rapid deep dive into some of Ireland's darkest corners. Because the whole island is scarred by history. Let's start in the north, in Belfast, at the Crumlin Road Jail.
The Crum. This is a Victorian-era prison that is practically synonymous with human suffering.
Right.
Prisons are inherently high-stress, traumatic environments, but Victorian prisons were built on specific principles of psychological torture, isolation, and brutal physical punishment. The thick stone walls of Crumlin Road absorbed the terror, the madness, the executions, and the absolute despair of thousands of inmates over a century and a half.
And a lot of those inmates never left. Today, it's widely considered one of the most haunted places in Belfast. Modern paranormal investigations regularly capture Class A electronic voice phenomena there. They hold events during Halloween, and people report being violently shoved, hearing heavy iron cell doors slam shut on their own when there's no draft, and making direct contact with the angry spirits of deceased inmates who are still serving their sentences in the afterlife. The stone literally recorded their misery.
From Victorian misery, we move down the timeline to medieval occultism. Down in the village of Shannagolden in County Limerick, there are the crumbling ruins of St. Catherine's Augustinian Abbey. But locals don't dare call it by its holy name. They call it the Abbey of the Black Hag.
And the reason why is pure nightmare fuel. Back in the 1290s, this was a functioning, highly respected convent. But rumors began to spread through the village that the nuns were practicing dark arts, witchcraft, and blood magic right on the holy altar.
Sacrilegious.
The rumors were so persistent and so deeply disturbing that Pope Martin V personally intervened and ordered the convent permanently shut down and disbanded.
But one nun refused to leave. She stayed behind at the deserted, decaying abbey, continuing her dark rituals in absolute isolation. Over time, the locals claim that her intense engagement with the dark arts physically manifested on her body. Her skin, specifically her face, turned entirely unnaturally black with corrupted magic. Hence, the Black Hag.
But she isn't even the scariest thing about that abbey. There is also the ghost of the Countess of Desmond. For reasons lost to history, likely involving a brutal power struggle or a horrifying betrayal, the Countess was buried alive underneath the church altar. Can you imagine the sheer suffocating horror of that death? Waking up in the pitch black, running out of oxygen, trapped under thousands of pounds of sanctified stone.
The trauma of being buried alive creates an incredibly volatile, violent spiritual tether. And today, locals walking past the ruins in the early, quiet hours of the morning report hearing her muffled, agonizing screams.
That's terrifying.
Even more terrifying, they hear the distinct, frantic sound of bloody fingernails scratching against the stone from deep beneath the earth.
My goodness. But if we're talking about mass trauma creating a haunted landscape, we have to talk about Aughrim Battlefield in County Galway.
This site is known locally by a very grim moniker, the Bloody Hollow. In the year 1691, it was the site of a massive day-long battle between the forces of William of Orange and James II. Over 40,000 men clashed in this relatively small valley.
The carnage was unprecedented in Irish history. Thousands of Jacobite soldiers were slaughtered in a matter of hours, and they were not given proper burials. The logistics of dealing with that many dead were impossible, so their bodies were simply left in the hollow to rot in the open air for years.
Just left there.
The earth literally soaked up the blood, the iron, and the sheer terror of thousands of young men who died in agony.
If we go back to the idea of a geographic battery, that kind of mass, concentrated death, the literal saturation of iron-rich blood into the soil leaves a permanent scar on the environment's energetic field. Today, people who visit the Bloody Hollow report seeing the full-body apparitions of Jacobite soldiers. They are covered in blood, standing completely still in the misty fields, just staring blankly into the abyss.
Wow.
They don't interact. They are trapped on a continuous loop in the moments of their own violent deaths.
Which brings us to the granddaddy of them all. If Blarney is the most famous castle, Leap Castle in County Offaly is undeniably the bloodiest. The history of this place reads less like a history book and more like a horror script.
It dates back to 500 AD, and it has been fought over by various Irish clans for centuries, most notably the O'Bannons and the O'Carrolls. But the O'Carrolls were exceptionally, creatively ruthless.
They were brutal. There's a famous story where the O'Carrolls invited a rival clan, the McMahons, to Leap Castle for a grand feast to supposedly negotiate a truce. It was pitched as a diplomatic dinner, but it was a trap. The O'Carrolls poisoned the food and the wine, massacring the entire McMahon clan at the dinner table as they choked and died in agony.
And the violence wasn't just directed at external enemies, it was deeply fratricidal. In one of the most infamous events in the castle's history, an O'Carroll warrior stormed into the castle chapel while his own brother, a priest, was holding mass.
Unbelievable.
In a fit of rage, he ran his brother through with a sword, murdering him right on the holy altar in front of his family.
That room is now known as the Bloody Chapel, and the castle is haunted by all of them. The murdered McMahons, the slain priest, and a terrifying spirit known as the Red Lady, a tall woman holding a dagger who wanders the halls with a vacant stare after she tragically took her own life.
When you synthesize all of this, the Victorian misery of Crumlin Road, the dark arts of the Black Hag, the mass slaughter of Aughrim, and the fratricidal betrayals of Leap Castle, you start to clearly see the bigger picture. Ireland has a history of deeply rooted pagan magic, brutal tribal conflict, medieval siege warfare, and intense localized emotional trauma.
It acts as a massive geographic battery. The whole country is humming with it.
Precisely. The land itself is charged with centuries of bloodshed and occult practices. So when you look at an object like the Blarney Stone, a 330-million-year-old fossilized graveyard embedded in a fortress designed for boiling men alive, cursed by a ruthless warlord and surrounded by plants that naturally produce lethal toxins, it makes perfect, terrifying sense that it would act as a lightning rod for all that latent spiritual energy.
Let's bring this all together. We have journeyed from the bloody, fat-soaked machicolations of a medieval war machine to the microscopic remnants of prehistoric death. We've explored the psychological manipulation of Queen Elizabeth's Blarney, the brutal, undeniable consequences of a territorial curse, and the phantom horrors that stretch across the entire Irish landscape.
Blarney Castle is undeniably a beautiful tourist attraction on the surface. It's a masterclass in PR. But just inches beneath that manicured, romanticized exterior, it is a monument to war, ancient death, and a remarkably active, deeply hostile curse.
It's less of a wishing well and more of a spiritual anglerfish, dangling a beautiful, glowing promise of luck and eloquence just to draw you into the dark. Which leaves us with a final, very provocative thought to chew on as we wrap up today's deep dive.
If the Blarney Stone's true power, its defining characteristic, is the ability to deceive without offending, what if the legend of it being lucky is the greatest deception of all? What if this ancient fossilized battery doesn't grant you eloquence at all? What if the stone simply propagates that myth to draw millions of unsuspecting people to the edge of a 100-foot drop just so it can feed on their raw, instinctual fear?
Wow. Millions of people, year after year, willingly offering up their terror to an ancient rock. That is a chilling thought. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. Check out our channel for more deep dives into the historical and the paranormal.
And leave a comment with your thoughts on that final theory. Is the stone feeding on us?
Thank you for listening to Haunted Podcast. I hope you have a safe and absolutely curse-free night.